Proverbs chapter 8, from sentences 1 to 11, and then the concluding sentences in 32 to 36. Proverbs 8, 1 to 11, on the blessings of wisdom. Does not wisdom call? Does not understanding raise her voice? On the heights beside the way, and at the crossroads she takes her stand. Beside the gates in front of the town, at the entrance of the portals she cries aloud, "To you, O men, I call, and my cry is to the children of man. O simple ones, learn prudence. O fools, learn sense. Hear, for I speak noble things, and from my lips will come what is right. For my mouth will utter truth. Wickedness is an abomination to my lips. All the words of my mouth are righteous. There is nothing twisted or crooked in them. They are all straight to him who understands, and right to those who find knowledge. Take my instruction instead of silver, and knowledge rather than choice gold. For wisdom is better than jewels, and all that you may desire cannot compare with her. And now, O sons, listen to me. Blessed are those who keep my ways, hear instruction, and be wise, and do not neglect it. Blessed is the one who listens to me, watching daily at my gates, waiting beside my doors. For whoever finds me finds life and obtains favor from the Lord. But he who fails to find me injures himself, and all who hate me love death." This is the word of God.
Thanks, Jez. Good morning, everyone. I'm Derek. If we haven't met yet, we've been part of this church since 2020, and my family's down here, and they've promised to warn me with little signals if there's any pigeons walking behind me today. If you're new to our church, we have an ongoing war with the pigeons here. Well, have you ever had the experience where you've shared the same information in two different contexts and noticed just how different it is that people listen to, how well they listen in those two different contexts? Let me tell you about an example for me. So we used to live in Indonesia. We used to serve as missionaries there. And every now and then we'd come back from Indonesia to visit Australia. And when I was back here, sometimes we'd share stories of what it was like to live there, like how we survived the heat, how you'd greet people, how you'd use a squat toilet. And most people in Australia, I would say, would listen with a polite passing interest. "Oh, really? Is that how it works over there?" But if we were in Indonesia and we were living there, sometimes we would have visitors from Australia. And when they got off the plane and we told them how to greet people, how to manage the heat, how to use that squat toilet, they would listen as if their life depended on it. And so I've got a question for you this morning here at church. When the thing that's being communicated is not how to use an Indonesian toilet, but when the thing that's being communicated is God's wisdom, what kind of listener are you? Are you that detached, polite listener back in Australia who never really thinks you're going to need the information? Or are you like someone who's just got off the plane in Indonesia and you know if you don't get instructions on how to use the toilet soon, you're in really big trouble? So we're week 2 into a 12-week series on Proverbs. And in the weeks that are coming up, Jeremy's going to come up here and Jacob's going to come up here each week preaching on God's wisdom on topics like work and words and dating and marriage and conflict and decision-making. What kind of listener are you going to be as they preach? So the difference, it all depends on whether you believe you're going to need the information, doesn't it? And we can actually learn a lot just from looking at the structure of the book of Proverbs. Proverbs is most famous, isn't it, for its short, pithy sayings, for its proverbs, collections of hundreds of them. And we're going to spend most of our time in this 12-week series looking at those short, pithy sayings by theme. But actually, the first 9 chapters of Proverbs isn't quite like that. The first 9 chapters is a series of longer speeches. And the point of those first 9 chapters, the main point, is to persuade us to pursue wisdom, to convince us that we need wisdom. See, all that wisdom from chapter 10 onwards in those short, pithy sayings, that could be the most wonderful, that could be gold. But if we're not motivated to listen to them, if we're not motivated to apply them into our lives, it could all come to nothing. And so God, in his wisdom, in structuring this book of Proverbs, has started the first chunk to convince us that we need wisdom. And Jeremy and Jacob, in their wisdom, putting together this series, have put a talk like this at the start, a talk on our need for wisdom. And so my very simple goal for today's talk, my prayer for each one of us from today's talk, is that as we leave church today, we're going to be so convinced of our need for wisdom that we'll be hungering for it, that we'll be chasing after it, that we'll be pursuing it, that we'll be committing ourselves to grow in wisdom week by week as we do this series. But it's not going to be me, first and foremost, that does that convincing of you that you need wisdom. It's going to be someone called Lady Wisdom. So come with me to Proverbs chapter 8, where we're going to meet her. So chapter 8 is one of those speeches I mentioned in the first 9 chapters. Lady Wisdom is the speaker. We have her described in the opening few verses. So if you've got a Bible, read along with me. If not, you can see it up on the screen. I'll read it out from chapter 1, verse 1 of chapter 8. Does not wisdom call? Does not understanding raise her voice? On the heights beside the way, at the crossroads, she takes her stand. Beside the gates in front of the town, at the entrance of the portals, she cries aloud. So this is Lady Wisdom crying out. And just to be clear, Lady Wisdom is wisdom personified. This is poetry. There's no such actual person called Lady Wisdom. This is wisdom personified so that we can better understand what wisdom is. Just like if you've seen the movie Inside Out, you get sadness personified and joy personified. They become characters, so we better get our heads around these different ideas. This is wisdom personified in this poem in chapter 8. So here she is. She's crying out to us, calling out for our attention. She goes to the busiest, the most public, the most bustling places. Did you see that? The heights, the crossroads, the city gate, because she's got something really important to say to us. What is it? Verse 4, we hear her voice for the first time. To you, O man, I call, and my cry is to the children of man. O simple ones, learn prudence. O fools, learn sense. So that, in a nutshell, is her call to all people, the children of man, including those who are not yet wise, the simple ones, the fools. And it's a call to pursue wisdom, learn prudence, learn sense, grow in this, chase after this, she's saying. It's like she's sending out invite cards, and it's a really big invitation to a whole way of life. She wants to convert us into people who value wisdom, who hunger for wisdom, who devote ourselves to getting it and growing in it. So how's she going to do that in this speech, in this poem of chapter 8? The main way she's going to do that is by convincing us that we need it. So from verse 6 onwards, she gives a whole series of reasons why we need wisdom. And I'm going to highlight the 3 big ones as we go. So the first one is this. Wisdom tells us the way things really are. See, if we want to navigate life well, then we need to understand how it works. If we want to grow in the skill of living, we need to understand the way things are. And wisdom tells us that. I'll read from verse 6. Hear, for I will speak noble things, and from my lips will come what is right. For my mouth will utter truth. Wickedness is an abomination to my lips. All the words of my mouth are righteous. There is nothing twisted or crooked in them. They are all straight to him who understands, and right to those who find knowledge. See, to live well, to make good decisions in our lives, we need a reliable source on reality. I am that, says Lady Wisdom. I am that. I am right. I utter truth. My words are straight and right. You want to know the way the world is? Come to me, says Lady Wisdom. Get wisdom. Now, when Wisdom says that she is right, verse 6, and true, verse 7, is she just talking about morality? About what's morally right? Well, yes, she's certainly talking about that, but not just that. See, wisdom definitely includes morality, because ultimately evil is bad for us as well as others, which makes evil a foolish thing. But wisdom is more than just moral rightness and truth. You can have a profound knowledge of every ethical rule, and you can do your very best to follow those ethical rules all the time, and you can still act like a fool. You can still make a mess of your life. You can still make a mess of other people's lives. When we moved to Indonesia, we moved with, I would say, good moral convictions and desires based on the Bible, wanting to love people, wanting to help people. Now, let me tell you about an experience we had early on. We were living in a poor community. It was a Muslim community. The average worker in our community, if they had a job, and plenty didn't, would have got about $6 a day for their work. And early in our time there, a young married couple that we'd become friends with came to us in a time of crisis. They said, our little baby girl is really sick. We need to take her to the hospital, but we can't afford to pay the hospital bill. Can you help us? Well, we could. It was about 50 Australian dollars that they needed. The girl's condition really was serious. She did need medical help. So we gave the money and the girl recovered. But sometime later, the father from that same family got sick. He got dengue fever and typhoid at the same time, which was a dangerous combination. By that point, we'd lived in the community longer, and we knew that normally, typically when someone in the community is sick, extended family and just neighbours will all just pitch in a little bit, which will usually bring together enough to get someone the hospital costs. The wife came and asked us for money for the husband's situation, and so we asked her, because we now knew this, we said, well, how much have you been able to collect from the community so far? And she said, no one will give us anything. In fact, they haven't even been visiting my sick husband according to the usual custom. You've got your rich white friends, they said. Why would you need us? So that was a sinking feeling moment for Anna and I. We wanted to help, but what we'd actually done was hurt. See, we discovered through that this family had been part of a delicate, interdependent ecosystem, a system of financial support, social, emotional support, and when we gave that money, we messed it up. Now, we had good, biblical, moral convictions and motives for going there and doing what we did, but when it came to living amongst and helping those living in poverty, we lacked something. Wisdom. So this is the really important truth for all of us. We can have flawless morals. We can have good, loving intentions. And yet we can still make a mess of our life. We can still make a mess of other people's lives. We can still make a mess of our ministry, our efforts to serve God and obey his commands of loving others and sharing the gospel with the world. We can still make a mess of all of those things if we lack wisdom. Jacob talked about this last week, helped us to see, if you were here last week, that so many of those decisions that we make in life, the moral rules alone don't tell us what to do. Should I live in this city or that one? Should I spend my money on this or that? Should I talk to that person about that issue, or should I just let it go? Should I download that app or delete it? Should I watch that show on Netflix or not? Should I date that person or not? Should I discipline my child this way or that way or not? The moral rules alone usually won't answer those questions for us. To make life's decisions well alongside the moral rules, we also need to understand the way the world works, to understand the way people work, the people around us, the way we work, the way the human heart works, the way things really are, and that is what wisdom tells us. Folly, on the other hand, which is the opposite of wisdom throughout this book, folly doesn't give us that true version of reality. Folly, verse 8, gives us what is twisted, what is crooked. See, folly's version of reality is not the way things are. But the problem is, folly's version often sounds like it is, because it's what we want to hear. It often comes with attractive or seductive promises. There's a shortcut here, just take it. There's a pleasure there, don't worry about the consequences, go for it. Now, the big problem with folly's version of reality, well, one of the big problems, is not just that it's immoral, which it often is, but it's false. It's not true. It's wrong. It's crooked. It's perverse. It's not reliable. It's painting a picture of the world which is not true, and it's calling us to shape our lives around that false picture, which is contrary to God's good and ordered design. And it keeps saying to us, don't worry, there won't be any consequences, but there will be. If you rely on folly's false version of reality, you will suffer. So you can see that as we navigate life, there's a battle going on. It's a battle for reality. And wisdom, God's wisdom, Lady Wisdom, has the true version. Because wisdom tells us the way things really are. Back when we were living in Indonesia, we were part of lots of WhatsApp groups with my students and our friends from church. One of the features of WhatsApp groups in that country was hoaxes. Just regularly on whatever WhatsApp group you would be on, every now and then there'd be this message that someone forwarded saying, a bunch of bananas has been injected with HIV-positive AIDS. Don't buy bananas. Or if you talk to your phone while it's plugged in and charging, it'll explode and you'll die. And these messages would come in and we'd all get really anxious and we'd stop buying bananas and we'd stop charging our phone until someone sent another message saying, look, I've researched this. Turns out it's just a hoax. And we'd all sigh a sigh of release. But what a mess. What a mess we can get ourselves in when we don't have a reliable source of information, a reliable source of truth. But that's pretty small fry. If we end up stop eating bananas for a few weeks, pretty small fry. But what if we're making life's biggest decisions without a reliable source of information on the truth? Is that what we're doing now? See, wisdom is so valuable because it's a trustworthy source of truth. It tells us the way things are. And that makes it better than gold. Verse 10. Take my instruction instead of silver, knowledge rather than choice gold. For wisdom is better than jewels, and all that you may desire cannot compare with her. So I started by asking what kind of listener you will be as wisdom is preached each week from the front this term here. Just imagine for a moment that instead of preaching the wisdom of Proverbs, Jeremy got up here and Jacob got up here and handed out gold bars. To everyone who was here each week, we'd hand out gold bars. And I did a bit of research to find out how much a gold bar is worth. Apparently a standard 12-kilogram gold bar, 2 million Australian dollars. Imagine if they were handing those out each week. How receptive would people be? What would numbers at City Light be like, I wonder? Wisdom is actually better than that. Better than gold. All that we desire, it says, can't compare with her. Because wisdom tells us something we really need to know to navigate life, and that is the way things really are. So that's our first reason why we need wisdom. It tells us the way things really are. Let's have a look at the second one now. The second reason is that it tells us what to do about it. It guides us in taking that true reality from the first point and turning that into decisions, turning that into action in our lives. Let's read from verse 14. And this is still Lady Wisdom speaking, I have counsel and sound wisdom. I have insight. I have strength. By me, kings reign, and rulers decree what is just. By me, princes rule, and nobles, all who govern justly. So leaders, like kings and rulers and princes, leaders have a lot of decisions to make, don't they? Complex decisions. They need to know how to piece the whole situation together, all the unique circumstances, the facts of their situation, and then turn that into a decision, turn that into action. That's wisdom. That's what wisdom does. I have counsel, I have sound wisdom, says Lady Wisdom. By me, rulers decree what is just. That's wisdom, that process. Doing that process well, that's wisdom. Just imagine for a moment. Let's play an imagination game. You're a young person, you're 18 years old, you're inexperienced. Suddenly, you're made king of a whole nation. And before you know it, you're making decisions that are affecting people's lives. Let's keep the imagination going for a moment. Let's say that 2 women come before you, one living baby and one dead baby. Both of them claim that the living baby is theirs. And you have to make a ruling. What are you going to need for that situation? You're going to need a lot of wisdom, aren't you? You're going to need knowledge about the way things are. You're also going to need knowledge of what to do about that, what to do in this situation. Now, this situation is, of course, from the Old Testament, from 1 Kings chapter 3, and that young king is King Solomon. Do you remember the story? Do you remember what he did? He said, cut the child in 2 and give half to one and half to the other. And of course, when he said that, the true mother revealed that she was the true mother by crying out, no! How did Solomon have the wisdom to do that? Well, if we read just before that incident, we'll see that he asked God for wisdom when he became king. So God gave him wisdom. And when God gave him wisdom, that meant that with wisdom from God, he now understood the way things are. In this case, that meant understanding what the heart of a true mother is really like. But it wasn't just that. It was also knowing what to do about that, in which this case it was putting up this test with the cut the baby in half command. There's no rule book for that. The 10 Commandments, as wonderful as they are, they don't tell you what to do in that situation. You also need, alongside that, you also need wisdom. Now, if kings and rulers, with all of their responsibilities, need wisdom to lead nations, I can tell you what, we need it in our lives too, to lead ourselves in our lives. We need it to live well. We need it, if we're followers of Jesus, we need it to carry out his commands to us in his life, in our lives. To loving others, to making disciples. We need it for that too. We need wisdom. And then as we get it more and more, and as we live this out, what's going to happen? What's going to be the fruits of having God's wisdom in our lives? Verse 18, have a look. Lady Wisdom still speaking. Riches and honour are with me, she says, enduring wealth and righteousness. My fruit is better than gold, even fine gold, and my yield than choice silver. I walk in the way of righteousness, in the paths of justice, granting an inheritance to those who love me and filling their treasuries. Wow. Those are the fruits of wisdom. Pretty good ones, aren't they? Honour, wealth, righteousness, justice. Really? I hear some of you asking in your heads right now, really? If I really learn wisdom and apply it, will I really become rich? Well, it's not as simple as that. And as we keep reading Proverbs, as we keep reading wisdom books in the Bible, like Job and Ecclesiastes, we'll discover that when you throw the complexity of oppression by others or injustice into the mix, it doesn't always work out like that. It gets more complicated. But don't let that complexity stop us from hearing what Lady Wisdom is saying to us here. Because what she's saying to us here is true. When we understand the way things really are, and when we know what to do about that, life does get better. Life does get better than it would have been if we'd kept living like fools. It gets better because we avoid the self-harm of folly, and we open ourselves up to the fruits of wisdom, which, verse 19, are better than gold. Honour, wealth, righteousness, justice. She's saying these are the things that are found on the path of wisdom. Okay, let's recap. Why we need wisdom. We need it first because it tells us the way things really are. Second, because it tells us what to do about that. Now we'll do the third and the final one from this chapter. Because it's woven into the fabric of creation itself. It's woven into the fabric of creation itself. Let's read from verse 22. The Lord possessed me, this is still Lady Wisdom speaking, the Lord possessed me at the beginning of his work, the first of his acts of old. Ages ago I was set up at the first, before the beginning of the earth. When there were no depths, I was brought forth. When there were no springs abounding with water, before the mountains had been shaped, before the hills I was brought forth, before he had made the earth with its fields, or the first of the dust of the world. Before the world was made, says Lady Wisdom, I was there. Her point being, look, if she was there, if she's been around that long, she really must know the way things work, the way things are, the way the world works, and so we should listen to her. But as we keep reading, we find out it's more than that. It's not just that she was there before creation, but when creation happened, when God created everything, she was a witness. She was part of it. She was a participant. We'll keep reading, verse 27. She says, when God established the heavens, I was there. When he drew a circle on the face of the deep, when he made firm the skies above, when he established the fountains of the deep, when he assigned to the sea its limit, so that the waters might not transgress his command, when he marked out the foundations of the earth, then I was beside him like a master workman. When I just read out those verses, did it make you think of Genesis chapter 1 and the account of creation? I think that's what Lady Wisdom wants us to do. She wants us to replay that story in our minds and then put her into it. Put her back in that story. I was there, she's saying. I was beside him like a master workman. God used wisdom to make this world. And so wisdom is woven into its fabric. It's infused into all its parts. It's the world's design principle, wisdom. And so if we want to make sense of this world, if we want to navigate life in this world well, if we want to thrive here, why wouldn't we want to grow deep in this very wisdom that God used to make the world? If wisdom's principles are built into creation, if they're governing the moral structure, the underpinning all the workings of the world, why wouldn't we hunger and thirst to have Lady Wisdom guide us through this life? Back in 1970 in Melbourne, there was a building project that was underway to build the Westgate Bridge. It was going to link Melbourne's western suburbs to the Melbourne city. But a terrible tragedy happened on the 15th of October. A 112-metre long section of the bridge buckled and then collapsed, and it killed 35 construction workers. There was a Royal Commission afterwards, and they investigated why the disaster happened, and they concluded this, that it was caused by design flaws and an inadequate understanding of engineering techniques. And I tried to unpack that. I didn't fully understand it because I have an inadequate understanding of engineering techniques, but I understood enough to get the gist. And I think the gist was basically this, that they ignored the laws of physics. See, there's a pattern woven into our physical reality, isn't there? Which we often call the laws of physics. And if we understand and apply those laws well, our bridges will stand. And if we ignore them, they'll come crashing down. But here's the thing. It's not just for physical reality. There's also a pattern woven into moral reality. There's also a pattern woven into spiritual reality, into relationship reality, into gender reality, into health and well-being reality, into conflict resolution reality, into decision-making reality. And you put all of those together and we can call that wisdom. Understand and apply that wisdom, your bridge stands. Ignore it, it comes crashing down. Now, the thing is, we think we can get away with ignoring it. We think we can get away with ignoring wisdom. Maybe because we have ignored it in the past once or twice and we seem to get away with it, so we're emboldened to keep going. We need to realize that when we do that, we are going against the grain of reality, against the fabric of God's creation. And if we keep doing that, we will injure ourselves. Whatever our folly is, and there's all sorts of follies that the book of Proverbs is going to highlight for us, whether it's gossip or adultery, whether it's greed or laziness, whether it's lack of teachability or lack of discernment, if we keep ignoring wisdom's call, our bridge will come crashing down. So, we've seen this morning that we need wisdom because it tells us the way things really are, it tells us what to do about that, and it's woven into the fabric of creation itself. Has Lady Wisdom persuaded you? If yes, this is going to have a big impact on your life. If yes, what needs to follow is nothing short of an all-of-life quest. Have a listen to this closing appeal which Jeremy read out before, verses 32 to 36. And now, O sons, listen to me. Blessed are those who keep my ways. Hear instruction and be wise and do not neglect it. Blessed is the one who listens to me, watching daily at my gates, waiting beside my doors. For whoever finds me finds life and obtains favor from the Lord. But he who fails to find me injures himself. All who hate me love death. So if you've got to the point here in chapter 8 where you're persuaded by Lady Wisdom that you do need wisdom, here's what you should do, says Lady Wisdom. You should listen. You should keep my ways. You should hear. You should not neglect. You should listen. You should be watching. You should be waiting. There's nothing half-hearted about this, is there? This is what we started with, wasn't it? What kind of listener are you when Lady Wisdom speaks, when God declares his wisdom to you? Because what we're being invited to here is this picture in verse 34. There you are, you're keeping a vigil at Lady Wisdom's door. You're watching, you're waiting, you're hungry for whatever it is you can learn from her. Or that picture in verse 17 where we find out that Lady Wisdom wants your heart. She says, I love those who love me. She wants us to fall in love with wisdom. I remember when I first fell in love with Anna, my wife, I was so desperate to spend time with her. I would do anything to be with her. I remember when she agreed to our first date, which was a first date of sorts because it involved her aunt and her uncle and her cousin as well as the two of us. And it was going to be a video night at their place where she was living at the time. We decided we were going to watch this movie called Life is Beautiful. It's an Italian movie. And so I went to the video store earlier that day. And as I walked out of the video store, I noticed that it said that it was a dubbed version. And I knew Anna would hate a dubbed version. She'd want the original language version with subtitles. So I went back into the store and said, do you have the original language version? And they had a look and said, no, we don't, sorry. Try our next store in the next suburb. So I went to the next suburb and tried them, and they only had the dubbed version as well. Tried the next store, and the next door, and the next door, and I drove all over Canberra that day looking for the right version, and I didn't care because I was in love. And finally, you'll be pleased to know, I found one video store on the other side of Canberra, found what I was looking for. The date was a success, and things went on from there. I love those who love me, says Lady Wisdom. Lady Wisdom wants us to fall in love with wisdom, to move mountains, to be with her and to listen to her and learn from her. That new love-driven hunger that drove me to drive all over Canberra that day, might that be a picture of you this term? Might that be a picture of us as a community this term, chasing after wisdom together? Because this is a great opportunity to have 12 weeks having it preached, having it read, discussing it in small groups. Are we going to use this opportunity? Will we actually come out wiser in 12 weeks' time? Will we use the opportunity of a community doing it together where we can talk it over, chew it over, apply it together, help each other apply it? Let's pursue wisdom. Let's listen well when Lady Wisdom speaks. With that hunger of a new lover, let's pursue wisdom together, both this term and for the rest of our lives. Let's pray.